The Johnson family, Mark, Sarah, and their two kids, Emily and Jake, were excited to bring Christmas into their cozy Michigan home. They visited a local tree farm, selecting the tallest and most beautiful tree they could find. It was so perfect, it almost seemed unreal. After decorating the tree with glittering ornaments and twinkling lights, they admired their work. "It's going to be the best Christmas yet," Mark said, smiling at his family. But that night, as they lay asleep, something strange began to happen. It started with faint scratching sounds. At first, Sarah thought it was the wind brushing against the windows, but when ornaments began to fall, one by one, she felt uneasy. Jake, the youngest, woke up screaming that he saw something moving inside the tree. His cries were so desperate that even Emily, the older sibling who usually teased him, felt unsettled. Mark decided to investigate. Grabbing a flashlight, he approached the tree cautiously. "Probably a squirrel," he muttered, trying to reassure himself. As he pushed aside the branches, he saw something, a glimmer of two glowing eyes deep within the foliage. He stepped back in shock, just as the tree began to shake violently, toppling over and scattering decorations across the room. But it didn't stop there. The lights on the tree flickered and then burst, casting the room into darkness. In the chaos, Mark thought he saw a shadow dart across the room, but when he turned the flashlight towards it, there was nothing there. The family huddled together in the corner of the living room, too scared to move. Then they heard it, a deep guttural sound emanating from the tree. It was as if the tree itself was growling. Sarah, clutching her children, whispered, "We need to get out of here." They fled the house, spending the night at a neighbor's. When they returned the next morning, the tree was gone. Not toppled, completely gone. The only sign it had ever been there were deep scratch marks gouged into the floor and walls. Emily pointed out something else. The ornaments that had fallen were arranged in a circle, with a strange, unrecognizable symbol in the center, as though someone, or something, had been there after they left. Determined to make sense of what had happened, Mark contacted the tree farm. To his shock, the farmer admitted that the area where they had cut the tree was known locally as the Devil's Grove, a place where locals avoided cutting trees for generations. "That tree should have been left alone," the farmer said gravely. From that day on, the Johnsons never brought another live tree into their home. Instead, they switched to an artificial tree, though Sarah always felt uneasy during the holidays. No matter how many decorations they hung, the living room felt colder, darker, as if something had never truly left. In a quiet Alaskan town, 10-year-old Ethan was too excited to sleep on Christmas Eve. His parents had told him that Santa only comes when kids are asleep, but he was determined to see him in action. Bundled in his pajamas, he crept downstairs and waited by the tree, listening for the sound of reindeer hooves on the roof. Around midnight, Ethan's heart leaped as he heard heavy footsteps above, then a loud thud near the fireplace. His excitement turned to confusion when he saw ashes falling from the chimney, followed by a long, gnarled hand gripping the edge of the hearth. Slowly, a figure emerged. It wore a red coat, but it was torn and filthy. Its face was pale and stretched, with deep-set, hollow eyes that gleamed in the dim light. Ethan froze, too terrified to move. The figure crouched by the tree, placing something beneath it with deliberate slowness. Then, as if sensing his gaze, it turned its head sharply towards him. Their eyes met, and Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The family's dog suddenly barked furiously, snapping Ethan out of his trance. The creature snarled and retreated, vanishing up the chimney in a cloud of soot. Ethan ran to his parents, but when they checked the living room, there was no sign of the intruder. The only evidence left behind was an old rusted bell under the tree, engraved with the chilling words, "He sees you." Ethan never waited up for Santa again. Claire loved Christmas. The warmth, the decorations, the the joy of unwrapping gifts with her family. It was her favorite time of year. But in 2020, her Christmas morning took a dark turn. Among the neatly wrapped presents under the tree, Claire found a small box with no name tag. Curious, she opened it to reveal an antique locket. It was beautiful, but strangely cold to the touch. "Who's this from?" she asked, holding it up. Her parents and siblings exchanged confused looks. "It wasn't us," her mom said, frowning. Shrugging it off, Claire fastened the locket around her neck, admiring its intricate design. That night, Claire's dreams turned dark. She saw a woman in tattered clothes weeping uncontrollably in a dimly lit room. The woman's face was obscured, but her cries were filled with despair. When Claire woke, she dismissed it as a strange dream. But the following night, the same vision returned, more vivid than before. Over the next few days, odd things began happening. The locket would disappear from her nightstand and reappear clasped around her neck. She heard faint whispers when she was alone, and the air around her always seemed unnaturally cold. Desperate for answers, Claire took the locket to an antique appraiser. The appraiser's face turned pale as he examined it. "This belonged to a girl who disappeared decades ago," he said. "She was last seen wearing this very locket. No one ever found her." Terrified, Claire tried to get rid of the locket. She threw it away, burned it, even buried it deep in the woods. But every morning, she'd wake up to find it back around her neck. Objects around her room began to move on their own, books falling off shelves, drawers opening and closing without warning. She even started seeing fleeting shadows in the corners of her vision, always accompanied by a faint sobbing sound. Her breaking point came one night when she woke to find the weeping woman standing at the foot of her bed. This time, her face was visible, sunken eyes, pale skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones, and a mouth that twisted into a silent scream. Claire tried to move, but found herself paralyzed, unable to even cry out for help. The woman pointed at the locket around her neck, her hand trembling with urgency, before vanishing into thin air. Determined to end the nightmare, Claire reached out to a local medium, who confirmed that the locket carried the restless spirit of its previous owner. The medium explained that the woman had been wronged, and her anguish had trapped her soul within the locket. To free herself, Claire would need to bury the locket in consecrated ground and perform a ritual of forgiveness. With trembling hands, Claire followed the medium's instructions. She and her father drove to an old churchyard where she buried the locket beneath a centuries-old oak tree. As she completed the ritual, she felt a sudden warmth wash over her, the first peace she'd felt in weeks. Though the locket was gone, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that she was still being watched. Strange things occasionally happened around her during the holidays. Lights flickering, ornaments shifting positions, and faint sobbing that seemed to echo in the distance. She no longer participates in Christmas gift exchanges, fearing what might come next. For Claire, the holidays are a time of quiet reflection and a reminder that some gifts come with a heavy price. Christmas is a time for joy, but these stories remind us that darkness can lurk even in the brightest moments. As you celebrate this season, remember, some gifts are better left unopened, and some traditions are best forgotten. Merry Christmas, and sleep well.